Today we're going over our next topic in our ecology unit. It's going to be about trophic cascades. And we'll be exploring this topic through a couple different example ecosystems, as well as you'll be watching a short video linked to YouTube that will be going over yet another example. Upon completion of this video, you'll be taking an online Google form quiz that'll be posted to the Google Classroom. As we're getting into this topic, we're going to be making sure that we have a couple objectives to keep us focused here. Your primary objective during this video lesson is that students will be able to describe how trophic cascades affect ecosystem structure through top-down and bottom-up effects. And this objective is mirrored within a couple of our pertinent next-generation science standards. Now, I want you guys to look at these two pictures. They are going to be showing off an ecosystem. I want you, either in your student journals or just verbally to yourself, describe these two habitats. What animals do you see? What kind of algae do you see? And algae is going to be sort of the green material that you see in the photographs. How much of each, both animals and plants, do you see? What kind of physical shape do they have? And then ask yourself, too, which of these habitats look healthier, more productive, or even more diverse also, too? Because you may be surprised when you learn that these are actually the same habitat. They just happen to exist in two different forms. On the left, we have a kelp forest that's typified by having high diversity, lots of different fish and marine mammal species, as well as a foundation species in kelp, the long green plant-like organisms. To the right, we have an urchin barren. And this is actually the opposite state of this ecosystem that's characterized by almost no algae cover, no kelp, but pretty much just finding sea urchin, which is a type of echinoderm. But how? How are these two habitats the same thing? Well, it has to deal with what's called trophic structure. And trophy remains eating. So when you think of trophic structure, think of how other animals and plants interact through eating interactions. And an ecosystem is made up of several different interacting species. You can see towards the right, you have a diagram of a kelp forest ecosystem. Kelp forests are ecosystems that are found along coastlines, even along the coast on California here. You can see that we have several different species, from kelp to invertebrates, to fish, even to sea otters at the very top. And we can actually begin to organize this whole entire ecosystem through a system of both direct and indirect positive and negative interactions. When you see arrows pointing upwards, that usually means that it is that previous animal is being eaten. For example, sea urchins are eaten by sea otters. The sort of width of those arrow bars will denotate how strong that trophic or that eating interaction actually is. And for the most part, a positive interaction means that it helps out another species. A negative interaction means it does not help out. An example of a positive interaction may be the fact that kelp provides habitat for some animals. A negative interaction can be an example of sea otters eating urchins. The act of predation is a negative interaction. And food webs are not the only way we can organize an ecosystem. We also can do this through what's called an trophic pyramid. And a pyramid, a lot like the pyramids of Egypt, have a structure to them. At the very base, the foundation, we have the producers. These are organisms that typically are the food. Think of things like grass, algae, and kelp. Above them, we have what's called primary consumers. And primary consumers are animals that eat. These are herbivores. Think of like deer, elk, cows, goats, and sea urchins. Also are examples of primary consumers. They are the ones who first eat the plant producers, or the algae producers. Above them are secondary consumers, and these are animals that are predators. They eat herbivores. So think of animals like sea otters that eat urchins. Think of animals that snakes eating mice, so on. Above, these guys can be tertiary consumers, and these guys are the super predators, the top predators. These are animals that eat other predators. An example of this can look like hawks and eagles eating snakes. And the pyramid also, the bottom base, they usually have the large population and have the highest energy stored within them. And as you go up, population changes as does energy. And as we know previously, the further you move up a trophic structure, the less energy we have, because these interactions are only about 10% efficient when it comes to their total energy expenditure. But today we're looking more into how these things are structured and how these systems interact. So, for example, we're looking at a coastal marine habitat beginning with kelp as our producers at the bottom, the sub-brown algae species. Above them, we have sea urchins, which are a primary consumer. These guys are actually herbivores. They have what's called an Aristotle's lantern, which is kind of their teeth, which looks like an upside-down box. And they will throw it out their, what's called aboral ending, or their mouth, to chew on what's called the holdfast, or the tie-down parts of the kelp. And these guys, if left unchecked, could actually eat whole entire kelp forests. What keeps them in check, though, are their secondary consumers, which are the sea otters, all cute and adorable as they are. As far as interactions amongst them, sea urchins have a negative direct interaction with kelp. They eat it. They are herbivores. Sea otters have a negative direct interaction with sea urchins, because sea otters are predators of sea urchins. But now, there are indirect interactions that happen here too. Because sea otters eat sea urchins, the main predator of kelp, sea otters in effect have an indirect positive interaction on kelp. When the system has sea otters, that means we have kelp, because sea otters keep the population of sea urchins in check. This is what's called a trophic structure here. We have multiple species interacting through trophic interactions. Again, trophy meaning eating or consumptive interactions. Problem is, though, we also sometimes can upset these trophic structures. Humans happen to be a large consumer and hunter themselves too, so much so that they have, in effect and historically, have hunted out species of seals and sea lions, which normally are the prey for the absolute top predator in coastal ecosystems, at least on the Pacific Ocean side, which are orcas or killer whales. When killer whales no longer have access to seals and sea lions to eat, they then what's called prey switch. They start eating another species, sea otters. And because otters have less energy in them than sea lions and seals because they're smaller, they happen to eat more. Orcas can eat so many sea otters that they practically become erased from the ecosystem or from the trophic structure. So as you look at this new trophic structure diagram, orcas have a negative interaction on sea otters, but because orcas are there and eating so many sea otters, orcas now have a negative indirect negative indirect interaction on kelp. Because there are more orcas, sea otters go down. Because sea otters are down, urchins go up. As urchins go up, kelp goes down. Without kelp, the whole entire ecosystem actually will, in effect, collapse. And you can see this demonstrated here on this graph taken from a scholarly journal article. When there are more killer whales, there are less sea otters. When there are less sea otters, more urchins, more urchins, less kelp. This is called a trophic cascade. The whole ecosystem begins to collapse. But so what? Why is this so important? Well, an urchin barren is a lot less productive than a kelp forest, which then can sustain more species, more diversity, and have more production. Top-down effects are not the only things that trophic structure can be impacted by. You also can be impacted by bottom-up effects. Bottom-up effects usually happen at the base level, the bottom level, like at the producer or kelp. When there's agricultural runoff or pollution that happens to put more nitrogen or more nutrients into the environment, that happens to beef up the bottom trophic level, the producers. They will produce more, becoming stronger, which then indirectly will affect the rest of the trophic structures, all becoming stronger interactions. Though, you have to note that too much of bottom-up effect can possibly become a toxic effect. Think of pollution. And these effects, both top-down and bottom-up, are not just held to marine systems, they're also held to terrestrial systems too. So let's take a look example at a terrestrial or a land-based system. Now, it's your turn to try though. Look at these three different interacting species: wolves, elk, and woody plants. Classify them as a producer, a primary consumer, or a secondary consumer. If you need to, feel free to pause the video. We can denotate that these species have these levels in the trophic structure. But now, take some time and then write some arrows that denotate or show their kinds of interactions, positive or negative, direct or indirect. What you should have drawn here is that elk are herbivores, so they have a direct negative interaction on plants. Wolves are predators, and they have a direct negative interaction on elk. Because wolves are eating the elk, wolves have a positive indirect interaction on plants. Because there are wolves, there are more plants. But what happens when there's no wolves, though? Take some time to write it down. When there are no wolves, that means elk go up. When elk go up in population, that means plant population goes down. With no plants, the whole ecosystem falls apart. So let's take some time to review now. An ecosystem can be organized by their trophic structure: producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, and more. It takes some time to think about how many consumers can an ecosystem support. Think back to the trophic pyramid and how efficient energy transfer is between the levels. How many can you have? And trophic structure can be affected by top-down, which increases or decreases in the top trophic level or the top predators, or bottom-up effects, which increase or decreases the bottom trophic level. Upon completing this video, be sure to watch the following YouTube video linked here. We'll provide you another example of trophic cascade, as well as complete the trophic cascade video quiz linked to the Google Classroom. If you have any questions, feel free to reach me by email or see me in class. Thank you. Have a good day.